Why was Najib Razak found guilty again, even after years of denials, political comebacks, and claims of being misled? And how did one scandal grow so large that it reshaped Malaysia's politics, its institutions, and its global reputation? This story does not begin in a courtroom. It begins with ambition, power, and a state fund that was supposed to secure Malaysia's future. Instead, it became the center of one of the largest financial scandals in modern history. In this video, we break down why Najib was convicted in his latest trial, the key arguments raised in his defense, and how the court ultimately dismantled them to arrive at its verdict. When Najib Razak became Malaysia's Prime Minister in 2009, he also took on extraordinary control over One Malaysia Development Berhad, better known as 1MDB. He was not only the head of government, he was also finance minister and chairman of 1MDB's advisory board. That concentration of authority would later become central to the case against him. 1MDB was created with the aim of driving national development, attracting foreign investment, and transforming Malaysia into a high-income economy. Billions were raised through bonds and loans, often with government guarantees. But within a few years, large sums began moving through shell companies and offshore bank accounts across multiple countries. Investigators would later estimate that at least $4.5 billion was siphoned from the fund, with a significant portion linked to accounts controlled by or connected to Najib. The latest conviction focuses on money that flowed into Najib's personal bank accounts between 2011 and 2014. In total, nearly 2.2 billion ringgit was traced to him. Prosecutors argued this was not incidental or accidental. It was the result of deliberate abuse of power and systematic laundering of illicit funds. After a trial spanning 6 years, the High Court agreed. Najib was found guilty on 4 counts of abuse of power and 21 counts of money laundering. The court sentenced him to 15 years in prison for each abuse of power charge and 5 years for each money laundering charge, all to run concurrently. He was also fined more than 11 billion ringgit. These sentences will begin after the completion of his existing prison term for a separate 1MDB-related conviction. The truth is, this was not Najib's first conviction. In 2020, he was found guilty in the SRC International case involving a former 1MDB subsidiary, over 42 million ringgit that entered his accounts. That conviction was upheld by Malaysia's highest court in 2022, sending him to prison. The new verdict, however, concerns a much larger sum and strikes at the heart of the 1MDB scheme itself. Throughout the trial, Najib maintained that he had been misled. His defense centered on 2 claims. First, that he was unaware of wrongdoing within 1MDB and had relied on subordinates and advisors. Second, that the funds deposited into his personal accounts were political donations from Saudi royalty, not stolen state money. The court rejected both arguments. Judge Colin Lawrence Sequeira found that Najib had a direct and sustained interest in 1MDB, dating back to its earliest days, when it was still known as the Terengganu Investment Authority. Evidence showed that Najib's approval was pivotal in securing a massive $1.75 billion bond, despite later claims that he did not sign off on the bond document. The judge also rejected the narrative that Najib was merely a passive leader deceived by others. He noted Najib's extensive experience, intelligence, and dominance within government, concluding that it was implausible for someone in his position to be unaware of the fund's operations. The court described him not as a naive figurehead, but as someone who exercised decisive control. The so-called Arab donation defense fared no better. Najib claimed that approximately $680 million deposited into his accounts in 2013 came from the Saudi royal family. He produced letters purportedly supporting this claim. The judge found those letters uncorroborated, inconsistent, and likely forgeries. There was no credible documentary evidence linking the funds to Saudi royalty, nor any transparent accounting consistent with legitimate political donations to Malaysia's largest ruling party at the time. Instead, the court accepted the prosecution's tracing of funds from 1MDB-linked entities into Najib's accounts, and in some cases, back out again. This movement of money, including transfers involving Tenor Finance Corporation, was described as classic layering, a method commonly used to obscure the illegal origin of funds. Najib was found to have benefited personally from these proceeds, including payments for services that supported his political image and party interests. At the center of this financial maze was Joe Low, the fugitive financier long described as the mastermind of the 1MDB scandal. Although he held no official position in the fund, the court found that he acted as an intermediary, proxy, and agent for Najib in key 1MDB dealings. Evidence showed a close personal relationship between the two, including shared holidays and frequent communication. The judge concluded that this was not coincidence, but a working relationship in which Joe Low advanced Najib's interests through unofficial channels. Najib's attempt to distance himself from Joe Low was firmly dismissed. The court ruled that the claim he was misled by Low and other 1MDB officials had no merit. Notably, Najib never lodged police reports accusing them of forging documents or deceiving him, despite making such allegations during his defense. This absence of action undermined his credibility. The court also examined Najib's actions after the scandal began to surface publicly in 2015. A high-level task force involving the Attorney General's chambers, police, the Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission, and Bank Negara Malaysia was established to investigate 1MDB. The judge found that this task force was later disbanded and that Najib himself took steps that resulted in the removal of key officials, including the Attorney General. These actions were described as drastic measures taken to protect and consolidate his interests in relation to 1MDB. This pattern of behavior further reinforced the court's conclusion that Najib was not an unwitting victim of a rogue financier, but an active participant who used his authority to influence outcomes. On the money laundering charges, the judge divided the offenses into receiving, using, and transferring proceeds of unlawful activity. The defense argument that the funds were overdrafts or donations failed to raise reasonable doubt. The court found that the prosecution had proven each charge beyond reasonable doubt, based on documentary evidence and financial trails gathered through extensive international cooperation. That cooperation was critical. Investigators worked with authorities in the United States, United Kingdom, Switzerland, Singapore, and other jurisdictions to secure evidence across borders. Malaysia's anti-corruption agency described the conviction as the result of years of sustained investigative effort, overcoming legal and jurisdictional challenges that few cases ever encounter. While Najib now sits in prison, Joe Low remains at large. Intelligence reports suggest he may be hiding in places such as China, Macau, or Myanmar, protected by wealth and networks that make him difficult to apprehend. The court acknowledged the reality that Low has yet to be brought to justice, but rejected any suggestion that this undermined the case against Najib. The absence of one accused party, the judge noted, does not negate the culpability of another. The verdict carries consequences beyond Najib himself. The 1MDB scandal triggered Malaysia's first change of government since independence in 2018, ending more than 6 decades of rule by Najib's coalition. Even today, it continues to strain political alliances. Najib's party, UMNO, is now part of the current unity government, creating internal tensions each time a court ruling goes against its former leader. Supporters continue to portray Najib as a victim of political persecution. They gather outside courtrooms and chant in his defense. But the High Court's judgment was explicit in rejecting claims of a witch hunt. The evidence, described as cold, hard, and incontrovertible, pointed consistently to abuse of power and criminal misconduct. In sentencing submissions, Najib's lawyers highlighted his past contributions to Malaysia's development and his current health issues. They also shared that Najib was pursuing a PhD program while in prison, with his thesis examining Malaysia's economic transformation. The defense argued that this reflected Najib's continued engagement with national development despite his incarceration. The prosecution, however, emphasized deterrence, arguing that sustained corruption by someone at the highest level of government demands severe punishment. The court ultimately imposed sentences that reflect both the scale of the crime and the position of trust that was breached. Najib has indicated he will appeal. Under Malaysian law, the execution of the sentence could be delayed pending the outcome. But regardless of future legal maneuvers, the significance of this verdict is already clear. It affirms that the 1MDB scandal was not merely a story of mismanagement or betrayal by subordinates. It was a case where power, access, and influence were used to facilitate one of the largest financial crimes in the country's history. It confirms that Najib Razak's role was central, not peripheral. And it leaves Malaysia with a lingering question. After a decade of revelations, trials, and convictions, has the system changed enough to prevent another scandal of this magnitude? That question became even more pressing just days before this latest conviction, when the court rejected Najib's application to serve the remainder of his existing sentence under house arrest. The decision did more than keep him behind bars. It reignited political tensions and exposed fractures within Malaysia's ruling coalition. How did Najib's house arrest bid divide a country? Watch this video to find out.